Hi, this video is about the myth of American democracy. Now, when we were children, we were taught from our earliest memories that we live in a democracy that is governed by majority rule. We saluted the flag, we were conditioned to that, and this is examining whether or not that's true. I wrote a book. I'm a psychology professor, and I wrote a book called Duped, Delusion, Denial, and the End of the American Dream. A delusion in psychology means that you suffer from a false idea. Now, nations also suffer from false ideas. For example, we once believed that Saddam Hussein was developing nuclear weapons, and we went to war, at least in part, on the basis of that false supposition. That's a delusion. And when an individual suffers a delusion, he's just one step closer to mental illness. Can you say the same for a nation? Well, we're taking on a big task here, and that is whether or not we really do live in a democracy governed by majority rule for the last 236 years. There's a problem with that, and I think the problem begins with Susan B. Anthony. She was an assertive woman from New York who in 1872 said, "I'm going to vote for the President of the United States in New York State," except that Susan B. Anthony was arrested for trying to vote. She was charged with illegal voting because she was a woman and women were not allowed to vote. And yet we still go around saying that we live in a democracy governed by majority rule. Well, if 50% of the population cannot vote, that's not majority rule, is it? So, in 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed, allowing women to vote. So you could really say that you've lived in a democracy for 92 years, since the time that women could vote. But this video could also be called Hold Your Horses, because here's another Hold Your Horses, and that's called the United States Senate. Here's the problem. Take a look at California. Population 36 million. It has 2 senators, Barbara Boxer, Dianne Feinstein. Every state has 2 senators. There are 100 senators. So little tiny Rhode Island that has a population of 1 million, they also have 2 senators. Wyoming, with a population of 500,000, they have 2 senators. Now just imagine that the people of California said, "We vote for assisted suicide." But the people of Rhode Island didn't want it, and the people of Wyoming didn't want it. So that's 4 against, 2 in favor. Except that it's 36 million in favor and 1.5 million against. Are you following me? How can you have majority rule when you have a system like that? You know from civics classes and government classes that no bill can become a law in the United States unless it's passed by the House, passed by the Senate, and signed by the President. So if it doesn't make it past the Senate, it's not going to become a law. 50% of the United States Senate is elected by 16% of the population. Now let's take a deeper look at the U.S. Senate. Let's do a random sample of the United States of America. And this is what our diverse, multicultural country looks like. 50% of our population is made of women. 13% are black. 14% are Hispanic, and less than 1%, 3/4 of one person in this sample of 100 is a millionaire, okay? Let's compare that profile of America to the profile of the United States Senate. In the United States Senate, instead of 50% being women, oops, only 17% are women. Instead of 13% being black, oops, only 1% are black. 14% are Hispanic in the country, only 2% are Hispanic in the Senate. And less than 1%ers are millionaires in the population, but 66% of the U.S. Senate are millionaires. In fact, they're not just millionaires, they're multimillionaires, okay? Dianne Feinstein, California, is worth $100 million. Rockefeller is worth $128 million. John Kerry, 388 million. Senator Cole, 245 million. Senator McCain and his 7 houses, 20 million. Mitch McConnell, you see him on television all the time, $20 million. They're all smiling, aren't they? Well, that's not a very representative picture of the United States of America. Now, there was a photographer who took all 100 members of the Senate and made a composite digital photo of the average senator in the United States. And this is what a composite photo of all 100 senators morphed into one looks like. One smiling white guy who is, in fact, very, very rich. In fact, the average U.S. senator is white, is male, and he's worth $14 million. Now, that is a very important number because $14 million is the exact amount you need to qualify for membership in the top super rich 1% of American society. So the average senator is in the top 1%. So let's think about this. No law can be passed without the approval of the sitting millionaires in the U.S. Senate. Let's try that again. Another way of saying the same thing. If the Senate is made up of the top 1%, and no law can be passed in the U.S. without the approval of these millionaires, just how far do we have to go before we say that no law can be passed in the United States without the consent and approval of the top super rich 1%? It's a little leap of logic, but it's not that far. So, what kind of a country do you live in? It's better described as a plutocracy, a government by the wealthy where a controlling class is made up of the wealthy. Now, let's pretend we really did have a democracy with majority rule, just a guided fantasy. Well, if the popular vote, the majority, had their way, marijuana would be legal. That's true. The Republicans don't favor that. The Democrats don't favor it. But the people do. So both of their major political parties do not support what the American people support. This goes on. Assisted suicide would be legal. These are all based on real, recent polls. The Republicans don't support that in their party platforms, and neither do the Democrats, but the American people do. We would get out of Afghanistan right now. No, not for the Democrats, not for the Republicans. Gay marriage would be permitted. A slight majority of Americans now favor gay marriage. That's not on the Democratic platform. It's not on the Republican platform. Children of illegal immigrants could not attend U.S. schools. That's how the American people, the majority of the American people, feel. So I have in my book something like 30 items where this is what the American people want. And the Democrats support about 8 of those items, and Republicans support about 6 of those items. In other words, the majority of things that Americans want are represented by neither of our political parties. And we still go around saluting the flag and saying we live in a democracy governed by majority rule. Conclusion. I already gave this conclusion. I'll give it again. The majority of things the American people believe in and want are supported by neither political party. So let's take a few little exercises. I remember John Stossel always used to say, give me a break. Well, majority rule, give me a break. Here are a few examples. Do you know what insider trading is? It's a person who finds out that a drug company, for example, did not get approved for their drug. And their stock has been soaring, but the FDA has said, this drug is not effective or it's dangerous. So there's going to be a mad rush to the exits to get out of this stock before you lose your money. Insider trading based on inside information so that you can get out before the rest of the people get out, that's illegal. Okay? Now, Martha Stewart, she did it. She had a friend in a drug company who said, we didn't get approved by the FDA. Martha sold her stock before other people heard about it. And Martha saved about $274,000 of her own money, except that that was illegal, and Martha went to jail. All right? So there's only one group in the country that is allowed to engage in insider trading, and that's senators and congressmen. They can hear about something and sell their stock before their constituents can sell their stock. Or they can buy it before their constituents can buy it. And they can make a pile of money or save a pile of money. So, do you really believe that if you lived in a democracy with majority rule, that you or the people of the United States would allow their senators and congressmen to engage in insider trading and have an advantage over their own constituents? Give me a break. You remember Obama won, and the Senate was all Democratic, and the House was all Democratic. You thought, oh my God, he's going to really push through the kind of things the American people want. And one of those things was health care. And the idea was to get single-payer health care, like Medicare for everybody. Okay, that would save the country money. Lots of people wanted it. In Arkansas, something like 83% of the Democrats in Arkansas favored the public option or single-payer Medicare for everybody and that was their senator. Her name was Blanche Lincoln. She was a Democrat, and she voted against it. Why would she vote against her own constituents, 83% of whom voted for her? Well, she received $300,000 from insurance companies and special interests, and she voted no. And that's why we don't have single-payer health care. Joseph Lieberman came from Connecticut. 68% of the entire population of Connecticut favored the public option. There's majority right there. But Lieberman said he absolutely opposed it. He would filibuster against it. He received $2 million from insurance companies and special interests, and he voted no. So we have a country that's governed by majority rule. John Stossel, where are you? Give me a break. So a final example here is that Agent Orange was used in Vietnam. And there's a few ingredients in Agent Orange that are found in a herbicide, extremely powerful herbicide called Roundup. They're made by the same company. It's a distant cousin of Agent Orange. So when you spray Roundup on a field, it just about kills everything. So we thought when we originally were idealistic about recombinant DNA technology that they were going to take wheat and change the genes so that wheat could be watered with ocean water. But that's not what happened. When agribusiness got their hands on DNA technology, they created a soybean that could resist being sprayed with this toxic herbicide. It's called Roundup-Ready soy. There's Roundup-Ready cotton. There's Roundup-Ready other things too, corn. So they spray the field something like 4 or 5 times. Everything dies except the soybean. 90% of American soy's products are basically Roundup-Ready, which have a gene that has been spliced into the bean so that it's resistant to Roundup. Now the question is, if you have a baby and you want to feed your baby soy infant baby formula, do you really want to feed your baby soy formula where that bean was sprayed by a cousin to Agent Orange 4 or 5 times during its growing season? Or would you rather have the knowledge of saying, no, I don't want my baby to be having that stuff. That's Frankenstein food. I want my baby to have organic soy that has not been sprayed by an herbicide like that. Okay? 93% of the American people favor labeling genetically modified foods. Talk about a majority. That's been true for 15 years. But it's never become law. Special interests, Monsanto, plutocracy, Senate, millionaires. Do you have that picture? Okay. So here's a quotation that I think is extremely true by Edward Dowling. The two greatest obstacles to democracy in the United States are, first, the widespread delusion among the poor that we have a democracy, and second, the chronic terror among the rich lest we get it. Thank you very much for inviting me.